French women have been made beautiful by the French people. They're very aware of their bodies, the way they move and speak. They're very confident of their sexuality. French societies made them like that. I don't need my sexuality celebrated, and I certainly don't need it to be criticized. I didn't necessarily want it to be observed, but here we are. I'm attracted to male gestures and sexuality. I have a friend who, if she has a bad hair day, it affects her whole mood, because it is part of her sexuality, her confidence. I don't have that problem anymore. I think sexuality, especially, is one of those fluid things where oftentimes we find who we are through certain things that happen in our lives. I'm such a private person, and sexuality is such a private thing. A sex scene is much harder than a fight scene. It's one thing to say, kick higher, but kiss harder. That's just crazy. Speaking out, sharing what you think, and expressing yourself, regardless of sexuality or anything else, is the most important thing you can do as a man, as a human. People want to know and understand each other across lines of race, class, gender, sexuality, ability. I'm not really a musician. I'm a performer, and I love rock and roll. I've embraced rock and roll because it encompasses all the things I'm interested in: poetry, revolution, sexuality, political activism. All of these things can be found in rock and roll. Sexuality shouldn't define anyone. It doesn't define me. Love should be at the core of what you do. Obviously, in dealing with a relationship, sexuality has to be involved, and jealousy, and emotions like that. And I don't know. I've always been intrigued by those emotions. I am sensual and very physical. I'm very erotic. But my sexuality exists on a sort of a fantasy level. When you're 20 or 30, looking ahead, you see these benchmarks for relationships, career, ambition, sexuality, and they went off into infinity. When you get to 50, you look at what's ahead of you, and there's an end. It goes into a nothingness, a void. I'm not afraid of my femininity, and I'm not afraid of my sexuality. What an extraordinary thing it can be, love. How it will not defined by gender, by sexuality, by race, by religion, by anything. It's something else. It's something other. Blonde symbolizes sexuality and power. It holds very different connotations. The archetypal star has always been blonde. Class, race, sexuality, gender, and all other categories by which we categorize and dismiss each other need to be excavated from the inside. There are things coming from me that I felt I wanted to talk about. My search for my own blend of spirituality, my acknowledgement of my sexuality, my being the single mother of a young man. I think exciting sexuality is part of the fantasy, part of the entertainment of a love story. I am inspired by human sexuality. The act itself is mechanical and holds little interest to me. I'm straight, but it's immaterial what your sexuality is. Isn't it really just about being a fulfilled human being? Since I was a kid, I've always been skinny and frail-framed. I felt powerless as a child, but I always saw so much power in femininity and female sexuality. I am doing something I love, traveling the world, meeting fans, feeling confident, and I am no longer restricted by my sexuality. Anytime you bring sexuality into the comics pages, you have to brace for pushback. Mastery over the body, its impulses, its needs, its size, is paramount. To lose control is to risk beauty, and to risk beauty is to risk desirability, and to risk desirability is to risk entitlement to sexuality, and love, and self-esteem. Moonlight isn't an issue film. It's not about addiction. It's not about sexuality. It's not about identity. It's about all these different layers, because they are all a part of the character. Understand that sexuality is as wide as the sea. Understand that your morality is not law. Understand that we are you. Understand that if we decide to have sex, whether safe, safer, or unsafe, it is our decision, and you have no rights in our lovemaking. It's important for women to embrace their beauty and sexuality. Females are victimized and made to feel ashamed of their bodies, or they can't be smart and beautiful, and I try to work against that. If we misuse the gift of sexuality, we're going to suffer the consequences, and I firmly believe we are suffering the consequences. Women have a certain sexuality, and I think their bodies are beautiful, and I'm not embarrassed to explore that in a film. But there are things you get offered that are vulgar. and violent. Just like there's a side of me that's vulgar and violent. I've always been really open about my sexuality and who I am. I never thought a big coming out was necessary. Other people's perspective, just seeing this sexy image, might be that I take my sexuality very seriously. But I really don't. I like being sexy. It's fun, and I have had a nice little career of it.